Well, how many of you watch my YouTube channel? That's a bunch. That's good. That's good. I appreciate you more than you ever know. I think I tell you that quite often, but I really do. We introduced my beautiful, lovely wife over here. That's Sandra. And last August we celebrated 50 years of marriage. So we decided to just keep going and see if we can make a few more. So most of you don't know a lot about me, and that's okay. But my experience is about all I got. I mean, I've got a master's degree in agriculture at HKU. It's Hard Knocks University, and I'm working hard on my doctorate. But anyway, but I've had the YouTube channel for about 10 or 11 years. Started as a fluke. Didn't really know what I was doing or how to film, how to video, anything about it. But I would watch people doing videos, and I'd say, yeah, they did that just right, or yeah, there's an easier way to do that, or just saw some things that I thought might could be improved on. And I had daughters, so I didn't really have anybody to pass 40 years of homesteading on to, so started the channel, and just hadn't looked back since, and really enjoyed it. Really enjoy feeding it every week. And that's something you got to do if you got a channel. You got to feed it. But we're going to talk about how to purchasing the blackberries, planting, when to plant, everything that's got to do with planting. And by the way, I am not a public speaker, so I'm just as nervous as a cat. If you'll notice on my videos, I am always behind the camera. Very seldom am I in front of the camera, and there's a reason for that. So we'll talk about irrigation and mulching and pollination, and a lot about pruning. I get more questions about pruning than just about anything. And I have some people say, okay, it's winter, should I prune them all the way back to the ground? No. So anyway, a lot of questions, a lot of things to answer, and I want you to ask questions. I'll try to remember at the end of every little section to say, are there any questions? But if you got something you think you can't remember it later, pop your hand up. I don't have a problem with that at all. All right. I've had 700 feet of blackberries, little small U-pick operation, and had about 4 different varieties in that. Did that for 2 or 3 years. They finally aged out, and blackberries can age out. Now I've only seen this like a couple of times in my research, and they say somewhere between 8 and 15 years. So they started aging out a little bit, and then the gophers took over, and the gophers just decimated that patch. So I wanted to find out a better way to do this. I wanted blackberries, but I didn't want to feed the gophers, so that's when I started going to containers, and we're going to be doing a lot of talking about containers. And I don't know whether you're interested in containers or planting in the ground. You're still going to learn some stuff. So there's purchasing. There's 3 ways to purchase blackberries. Typically 2 ways, and then there's a 3rd way that few people do. And I'll talk about the little more obscure one. It's called plugs. It's almost like when you pull a tomato plant out, and it's got the little cone-shaped root system. That's what some companies sell a plug. Well, most people sell either bare root or potted. And there's pros and cons about each one, about buying whether you're going to buy bare root or potted. The potted is usually in a 1-gallon container. You might could find one larger than that, but typically it's going to be a 1-gallon container, and it will probably be at least a 1-year-old plant. The pros and cons of bare root. The pro is a bare root is cheaper. It's just usually half the price of a potted plant, and it's more available. Right now, it's just hard to find different varieties. Some of y'all may have been looking around online for varieties, and not just blackberries, just about anything, seeds or anything else, fertilizer, everything else is getting harder and harder to find. So buying bare root may be, if you want a specific variety, then you may have to buy bare root as opposed to potted. The con of bare roots, sometimes it's a little harder to establish, although I planted plugs, I planted bare root, I planted potted, and I don't think I've ever had any problems with any of those. So blackberries are pretty forgiving, so you'll find that out too. All right, potted. The pro on potted, it's already got an established root system. It's ready to go. You put it in the ground. Well, a friend of mine told me one time, if you when you're transplanting something, he said if you take enough dirt with it, it'll never know it's been moved. So that's the thing. That's kind of the concept of having a potted plant there. You got a 1 gallon pot. You pick it up and you put it right straight in the hole. You know, it's probably not even going to miss the pot. So it's a better established root system, and we've got some plants over here. Those plants will produce a few berries this year. And these are the ones we're going to plant in the containers and outside. But those will probably produce a few berries this year. Whatever it grew last year, those canes right there, will put out a few berries. Start to bloom in a little while, put out a few berries. So the first year, you'll at least get a taste of what's to come next year. So that's another good reason. So better established root system on a potted plant if you can find the variety you want, and you get first year fruit. A little bit, not a whole lot, unless it's a big potted plant. But the con is it's more expensive. Usually twice as much as a bare root, something like that. I've seen some places that sell them for 2 to 3 times what a bare root is. And the shipping may be different too, because you're shipping a potted plant instead of a bare root. It's just easier to ship, so there may be a cost on the shipping. All right, varieties. I can't research how many varieties there are, because there's dozens and dozens of varieties. I can tell you the varieties I've had when, and we'll talk about Primocane and Floricane varieties here in a minute, but when I started my patch, I'll call it my patch, when I was planting them in the dirt, I had Prime Jim, Prime Jan. You can't find them anymore, so I think they quit producing them. And I had Apache and Ouachita at first. And so I've got experience with those. I've got experience with Navajo, several of the ones that are named Native American names. Navajo, Apache, Natchez. Got experience with a few of those from years back. But right now I've got 3 different kinds of plants. I've got Primark Freedom, which is my favorite. I've got Ponca, which I don't know yet, because this will be my first year to get fruit off of it, but it went crazy. The plant went absolutely crazy. And just got some huge plants. They looked about half the size of that right there when I put them in the containers last year. And now they're 3 feet tall and 3 feet around. Some of them, they're just really nice. They look crazy. And the Ponca is supposed to be the sweetest variety that University of Arkansas has come out with. University of Arkansas does most all of the plant hybridization, breeding, whatever you call it, of blackberries. That's just kind of their thing. And we'll talk about some of the things the Primocane is the one thing they're known for recently. So there's dozens of varieties, and but there's 2 different, I don't know whether you call them varieties or just growth traits, and that's Primocane and Floricane. All blackberries up until 10, 15 years ago were Floricane blackberries, which means they produce blackberries on the Floricane, which Floricane means 2. Flora means flower. You get a flower, you get a blackberry. So they produce blackberries on the Floricane, the 2nd year cane. Then University of Arkansas bred up something they call Primocanes, Prime 1, which means they produce flowers and berries on the 1st year cane and the 2nd year cane. That's where some people get confused. They think the Primocane berries, because it's a 1st year cane, it's going to produce berries, and then they just cut it down. No, it produces berries 2 years. It's got the same traits as a Floricane. It's going to produce berries next year, but it will also produce some berries this year. It's not a huge crop, at least my experience has been. It's not a huge crop of 1st year berries, and they call it a fall bearing. I have found it to be more of an ever bearing. They start producing maybe in July, then it starts getting a little warmer, they slow down, and then September, October, November is when they start putting out a few more berries. So it's more, in my experience has been, it's more of an ever bearing than a fall bearing. But I really like the Primocanes. That's the one that's the one I like. All right. Again, and it's when you start talking Primocane and Floricane, I feel like I never come across and do it justice. Again, Primocane produces on the 1st and 2nd year's cane. Maybe I've never made that clear on the videos, I don't know. But it produces berries the first year, and then again on those same canes, produces the second year. Then the canes will die, just like a floor cane produces. Cane grows up, looks great, and you doctor it all summer long and whatever, but you don't get any fruit until next year. It comes out next year. That's when you get your fruit off those canes. And so Primocane just gives you two crops, and that's why I like them. It's nice to go out there in the hot summer or September, October, like that, and pick a few blackberries. Now, thorned versus thornless. My Prime Jim and Prime Jan were viciously thorned. This should be a short discussion because I won't go back to thorned blackberries. I mean, some people like them, and I think they may even be a little bit more productive. But unless somebody else is going to pick those blackberries for me and prune them out, that's the problem. If you're raising a floor cane blackberry, it produces its berries on last year's canes, but it produces the berries, and it's through in June probably producing all the berries. Well, in July, the canes start to die. After they produce the berries, those canes start to die. Now the mother plant doesn't die, but those canes start to die. Well, they need to be pruned out. They should be pruned out, supposed to be pruned out as quickly as you can. And I'm not always great about that, but it's supposed to be pruned out as quickly as you can because they may be diseased or something like that. You want to get rid of it and throw them away, not leave them on the ground, which sometimes I do. But anyway, do like I say to, not like I do. But pruning them out and throw them away, thorned canes in July and August is just not fun. I'd say I'll never go back to thorn. There are some great thorn varieties, but not for me. And again, they may be more productive. My Prime Jim and Prime Jan, now it's not an apples and apples comparison because my blackberries now are in containers and these were in the soil. But my Prime Jim and Prime Jan really produced. I mean, it was just like a hedge, 100-foot hedge of blackberries. Beautiful, beautiful. But I've had that with my Primocane too, in the containers. Now, you need to choose a variety that's right for your climate. Everybody around here pretty much zone 8 probably. You may have some 7s or some 9s. I don't know how far you travel, but most everybody's here is 8, or 8A or 8B. And most any of the varieties that Ed has here or that you'll see anywhere else locally are going to be for our zone. Except last year, my Primark Freedoms really got hurt in that big Texas freeze. The mother plants were fine, the containers were fine, so the root, it didn't hurt the root because the container was exposed to the same temperature. I mean, it had a layer of snow on it, which gave it a little bit of insulation. But I noticed after they started greening up, the canes started dying. Started at the tip. Would just slowly start going back toward the plant. And I lost maybe half my canes. Again, didn't kill the plant. The mother plant was safe, and she produced plenty of canes for this year. But that freeze really hurt it. So I'm going to say Primark Freedoms are not far too much further north than we are, and hopefully we never have another freeze like we did in 2021. So so choose a variety that's right for you, which is really not that hard to do because most of them say zone 7 to 9 or something like that. So you're pretty safe on that. Growth habits. There's 3 different growth habits with blackberries. It's what's called I call it sprawling, but it's really called trailing. And the dewberries you see on the side of the road that come up and they just go like that, that's a trailing blackberry. And there are some cultivated blackberries, some commercial blackberries like that have more of a trailing growth pattern, and those are definitely going to need a trellis. I think I had one time and just didn't care for it. They come up like 2 feet and then they just start going on the ground. And everywhere they go on the ground, if they touch the ground and stay there very long, they're going to start rooting. So you may or may not want that. Depends on where they start rooting. So trailing blackberries, you don't see a lot of them, but there are some out there, and that just needs to be a consideration when you're buying. Then they have what's called semi-erect and erect. Erect ones, they'll get a big quarter-size cane at the base, and it stands up and just. I still want to do a trellis, or I personally want a trellis, because when they get loaded up with blackberries and then the wind comes, I've seen a bunch of them break off. So you want something to hold the trellis, and we're going to do a trellis demonstration later. But that's the semi-erect and the erect, which is most of the blackberries are that. Fertilization. When you plant, most people, if you look online, they will say do not fertilize when you plant blackberries. And that, when I planted out in the field, when I did my patch, all I did was because I read that, I just put a big handful of compost and threw it in the hole and planted, and they did great. Like I say, they was really, really nice. But now, especially in containers, I'll tell you why in just a minute, but in containers, I always fertilize when I plant. Again, don't have much education on this, just telling you what I know and what I do. So if you do it and yours die, it's not my fault. Okay? Just tell it. So, but if you do fertilize, you may want to, especially if in the ground, you may want to use compost or an organic fertilizer. It's kind of hard to burn stuff with organic fertilizers anyway. And or you can use synthetic, but you want to stay away from the plant. You don't want to put out much, and you want to stay away from the roots, because the roots spread out a pretty good bit, and they're shallow. They're not a real deep rooted, because they're going out to produce more plants. They're going to go out 2, 3, 5 feet, and then they're going to come up. So just be careful with the fertilization if you use synthetic. Now, when we do this, I'm going to show you that I use a bunch of fertilizer. I use a pound of fertilizer when I do a container, but I stay away from the plant. I hadn't lost one. I burned up a lot of stuff in fertilizer, but I've never burned up a lot of blackberries. So I'm saying it works for me. Again, travel at your own risk. That's my disclaimer. So how deep or how shallow do you plant it? Basically, like most any other plant, you plant it just the level of the soil level that it came in from the pot. If it's a potted plant, then that's where you put it. Blackberries are pretty forgiving. You could probably go a little deeper, but I wouldn't go much deeper. The old adage is with trees and with other things, plant it high, it won't die. Plant it low, it won't grow. So don't go too deep with anything you plant. Plant at the level of the soil in the pot. Now, if it's a bare root, a little harder to tell, but you still can, because it was rooted in, typically it's going to be rooted in a pot of some sort, and you can kind of see where the color changes on it, and but it's got to have that crown, that mother plant. The crown has got to be above the ground. It doesn't have to be way above the ground, but it does have to be above the ground. All right, and again, use either compost, organic fertilizer, or a synthetic fertilizer. I'm going to use triple 13 today, which is pretty hot, but I'm going to keep it away from the plant. I'm not going to burn them up, I promise you that. All right, that's how deep and how shallow you do it. Plant spacing. Most people ask me how close together to put them and how far the rows need to be apart. As far as in the row, 3 to 5 feet. I did mine 4 when I planted in the ground. 4 feet. I planted 25 in a 100-foot row, so 4 feet apart. And they're just keep in mind that they're gonna, over the years, they're gonna fill in the gaps. They're if you plant 5 feet apart, and you say, well, it looks kind of dumb to have plants 5 feet apart. They're gonna fill in. They're gonna send roots out and come up. And there's other ways, tip layering, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, to fill in your rows if you planted them a pretty good ways off. It depends on your budget how you want to do that. And as far as distance. The first year I had my containers, and I've got these beautiful hillbilly blue containers. Half of my blackberries are in hillbilly blue, and half of them are in pretty orange. And but anyway, the first year I put the containers right up next to each other, just button up against each other, because it was kind of a room issue, a space issue, and I found a little bit more disease than what I thought I should have had, a little bit more fungus. So I gave half of them to my daughter, nice of me, and I spread them out to where it's probably around 2 feet in between them now. And I did that early last year. I guess I did it before the freeze. and it they didn't have. I'm not saying I don't have any not rust issue, but fungus issues, but it was much less. So I was wherever you're planting, whether it's in the container or whether it's in the ground, give them some room. They need room. Now row spacing. To me, row spacing is important. Now, if you just plant one row, it's not a big deal unless you're planting close to a fence. When you plant a blackberry, these are dead canes. Prune out the dead canes. Pretty easy to tell a dead cane. When you plant a row of blackberries, you expect them to, you put your trellis up and you want everything in a perfect row, and then that first year it sends up one and it's maybe a foot away in the row, it pops up and you say, got a new plant right in the row, right where I wanted it. But at row 3 or 4, it's sending out shoots 3 or 4 feet over here. And if you've got a walkway 8 feet wide and you've got another row over here that's coming in 3 or 4 feet, you got a problem. So unless you're growing commercially, which means you've got to put as many blackberries in per acre as you can possibly get. Unless you're growing commercially, I recommend 15 feet between rows, because you're going to lose 8 feet of walkway. 8 or 9, 10 feet of walkway. So 15 feet apart, you're going to have plenty of rows to walk, plenty of room to walk, wide space to walk, and to mow and whatever. Now, same thing applies if you have a fence over here. Don't plant, well, my mower's 48 inches wide, so I'll plant 50 inches from this fence. No, give it another 2 feet or something like that, so you'll have room to mow that fence line a year or 2 from now when that thing starts wandering. And sometimes I let them grow. If they're way out in the walkway, I didn't. If they were, I think my rule of thumb was if they were within a foot and a half of the trellis, then I would keep them. And if they went too far, then I would dig them up and pot them and try to save them, and whatever. But they will. My point is they will wander. Don't think you're just going to plant a straight row and it's going to be straight and beautiful just like a row of tomatoes all the time. It's going to spread out. The only thing I know of that I've never done it, that you could do to stop that if you really absolutely did not want it to go any further. You could probably dig a trench, put some corrugated tin or something down in there, a foot or 2 down in the ground, and then the roots would hit it, and not go into it. But that's the only way I know to stop that, because blackberry going to blackberry. It's going to do what it's supposed to do. All right, that's the walkway. Gotta leave space to walk through. And to mow, you're going to want to keep it nice and mowed. All right, we're going to be doing a demonstration in a minute of the containers. I like containers for several reasons. I mentioned before that the aging out of the blackberry, as well as the gopher problem I had, just pretty much decimated. It was over 3 or 4 years. They just go lower and lower and lower, and then after a while they just weren't worth messing with. Wasn't good enough worth messing with. So I haven't found a gopher yet that could get in that container. So that's why I like containers. I do have one blackberry at home in an earth box. I just did it as an experiment, and then I've got 18, I think, in containers. Now, I don't have a longevity report because it's only been 2 or 3 years. Will they live in a container 10 years? I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I can tell you they do really good for 2 years anyway. Unless you get a hard freeze, which we don't ever want again. And I have not been asking any bad questions. Yes?
Okay, can we go back to the freeze part?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you suggest covering them or anything? I mean, I know where we're at, we get down to 23, 24. Yeah. It's not kept, but I've had them in and out of I carry them in and out of the house.
Yeah. 23, 24, unless they're like that, even at that size, 23, 24 degrees is not going to hurt them. Okay. But -5, didn't like that at all. No. And for what, a week? Good gosh,
yes.
Don't ever let that happen again, people. Don't you pray? I mean, God, that was horrible.
It happened 40 years ago.
Did it 40 years
Yes.
ago? Well, when we first moved out,
Red River froze.
we've been
It's
living out
Shreveport.
there 40 years, and first winter we had, it got down to 0.
Yeah.
But it didn't stay there. Like next day it was 45 or something, if I remember right.
I was in Shreveport. Red River froze that year in
Red River
84, 85.
Wow. So anyway, I like containers, mainly because, like I said, with planting the blackberries, you want your rows straight, and you want your rows where you want your rows. You don't want your plants out here in the middle of the walkway. All my runners come up in that container. I don't have to worry about them going out, going up, and where I don't want them, or where I'm going to have to decide, do I kill it, do I mow it? I mean, if you mow it 2-3 times, it's done. It gets the hint, and it's pretty much done. So I just don't have that problem with containers. Again, is it a 10-year blackberry? I don't know. I'll have to let you know in about 8 more years. But for right now, they're doing great.
Are all of yours in wicking?
I've got that one in a earth box. It's a Wachita, and it's in a earth box. And I did it just as an experiment. Didn't really need it. But I had 2 extra plants. I'd come down here and got some plants, and I had 2 extra plants, and I thought maybe a cross pollination would help. I've read that once or twice that it helps to have a different variety of cross pollination. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I got some Wachita. The Wachita is a good berry, but it's a fairly erect berry, and it produces nice, sweet berries. And the Wachita was not even tinged by that freeze. Didn't bother that Wachita at all. I mean, I didn't lose a cane. I didn't lose a leaf. There were no leaves on it anyway, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with what's still. I mean, I'm still dealing, these canes right here, I just pruned 2-3 weeks ago. So I'm still having some dieback from last year's freeze. They produced, this cane produced some berries probably last fall, but then it died, and it's not supposed to do that. And I just attribute it to the freeze. It hurt it. It really did. But the Wachita, I've got 2 Wachitas, one in a big tub, one in the earth box, and neither one of them were touched by that freeze. So that's a good point. Glad you asked that. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've watched all your videos. You talk about wicking tubs, and I've watched a bunch of videos from that guy that you got the idea
Yeah,
from.
Mr. Leon.
Mr. Leon. But I was wondering, what's the advantage of that over just those protein tubs full of your mixture with an automated water in it? So I'm using a lot of peat moss. I've got good drainage, and I'm just thinking you got more dirt for the roots to grow in rather than a wicking tub.
So you're talking about just drilling holes in the bottom of them instead of making the
Yeah.
water reservoir on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
I just have heard so many people say they don't work well for vegetables. People do it, but I think you're going to be using a lot more water. And we're on a well, so it really doesn't matter. But if you're not on a well, and if you buy your water, then it's a different story. But with any container or with any raised bed gardening, especially, it takes a lot of water. That water just goes right straight through it. And grow bags, I do a lot of stuff in grow bags too. And grow bags, same way. I put a tray under the grow bag to catch about 2 inches of water. Otherwise, it would just go straight through that grow bag down in the ground. And they'll grow. You can grow some good stuff, but you have to water pretty much every day. And during this hot summer, when these are really growing, when the blackberries really growing, I do a lot of vegetables in earth boxes. I've got 20 earth boxes and 5 or 6 wicking tubs that I do vegetables in. But they do great. But her brother wanted to do a mineral tub. He didn't say wicking tub. He wanted to do a mineral tub. So I sent him a couple of my videos. Here's how to make them and all this stuff. So I saw him like in December of the year, that year he had done it. I said, how'd your tubs do this year? Oh, they didn't do worth a darn. I said, really? He said, no, they just didn't grow hardly at all. Put tomatoes, peppers, and all that stuff in them. They just didn't do anything. I said, well, how'd you build them? He said, well, I just drilled some holes in the bottom of them. No, that's just not the way to do it. If you want to do a wicking tub. So I don't have much experience, so I can't answer your question as far as experience goes, but I'm just saying some people have said they just don't work as well, like that. And it's not that hard to make these.
So, yeah, I used, Wicking Tubs I used 1 gallon milk jug.
Yeah, it makes it a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
If you got the milk jug, or if you know somebody that can give you some, instead of putting what we're going to show here in a minute is putting some corrugated pipe in it. Instead of doing that, you just put some number 10 cans, empty milk jugs that you drill holes in. They've got to fill up with water, and if it goes down the bottom of it, all your expense was for the potting mix and the tub if you had to pay for the tub. Anybody else?
On Wicking Tubs, what I liked about the concept was you use it year after year after year. Every year I use it again, my initial investment's less.
That's right.
Less. And
That's right.
pretty soon it's like, wow.
I don't know how long they'll last. Mr. Leon says, he said 7 or 8 years for a typical Wicking Tub. Now I've got my orange ones that my Ponca Blackberries are in. They're twice as thick as far as the plastic, the material. It's twice as thick as these blue ones are. Blue one's what you don't see around here most because it's a Tractor Supply. It's the cheap one. That's what I buy. My cows don't eat all that good. So, but that's the same thing with an earth box. Everybody says, "Man, earth box is too expensive. I can't afford an earth box." Well, I've had several people write and say that an earth box, that they had earth boxes that were 10 years old. One lady said hers were 15 years old. Another lady said hers were 20 years old. So they faded a little bit, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. So you take a $40 earth box or whatever it is, and you start cutting it down into 20 years, pretty cheap, that's pretty cheap. So earth box is the same way. I think earth box is going to last longer than that. Now, you could take there were 55-gallon blue 55-gallon barrels that if you know what came in it, something food grade, and cut them in half, and those would probably last longer than these. But I still don't know if they'd last longer than earth box. Earth box is thick. It's a be sure and come up here and look at them if you've never seen an earth box. But so I like earth box. I got 20 of them. I like them. Somebody else? What we've covered so far? Nope. All right. Forgot where I was. All right. So I like planting in containers simply because I've done both, and the containers keep the plant contained without running everywhere. It keeps the gophers out. But the problem with there's some pros and cons about planting in the soil, planting in containers. In containers, one of the pros is you control grass. I like to mulch blackberries heavily, and when I say heavily, I'm talking about heavily, when they were in the row. But that mulch, every time it rains, that mulch makes compost tea. That rain runs through there, and it just makes a beautiful compost tea, and that grass just runs toward it. So it's hard to keep grass out of your rows if, when you're in the rows. Not hard to keep grass going in those. They don't. Here's how you prune one of these. I'll just come over here and I'll see something coming up and I go. I just, not prune, but that's how you weed it, rather. So the pro of a container would be grass, gophers, and it's portable. You may be renting, or you may be thinking about buying another piece of property somewhere, and you say, "Man, I just hate to plant all these blackberries. I hate to plant all these fruit trees. I hate to plant all this stuff." Do it in containers. Take it with you. If there's, if you think you might be going somewhere. So the portability of these are, I have moved many things. I have moved barns and everything. That's why I invented that greenhouse, that cattle panel greenhouse. It's portable. In the summertime, I can pull it under a shade tree and grow something in it. In the wintertime or spring and fall, I can pull it out in the sun and have full sun. So I like portability. I really like to be able to move stuff around. Yes.
Pine straw, do you ever use pine straw on the top of it to keep?
I did. I use a lot of wood mulch. I've got a friend that's a neighbor right in the corner that has a tree maintenance company, and he was for a while there. He was just bringing me tons and tons of wood mulch, and it can be anything. It can. One day he'd dump, and I could tell it was cedar. You could smell it. It was cedar. And one day he'd dump, and it was pine. And I got an ongoing discussion with somebody online right now in the comment section. He said pine ruins the soil or something like that. I just never seen that. Now, you wouldn't want something like, I think it's locust or bodark that doesn't rot.
Right.
I know bodark doesn't. I think maybe locust too. You wouldn't want that in there because it's not going to decompose. It's not going to decompose down to a compost. But when we plant that and we plant the earth box, I'm going to be about 2 inches shy, and that's because I would put an inch or two of compost. I mean, you put compost, but an inch or two of wood chips on top.
Yeah.
Pine, straw. Once pine is, as I understand it, again, working on that doctor's degree, so I'm not sure. But as I understand it, everybody says pine is so acid, you can't, don't plant anything under pine needles. The way I understand it is once those pine needles die, they're not as acid anymore. It's only the green ones. So dead pine needles, I think would work okay. You've got, there could be a pH problem. Blackberries like anywhere from 5 to 6.5 pH. And that's why when we plant, we're going to put some lime in it because peat is the biggest component of the mix there. And peat is, I think it's 4.5 to 5.5. So just need to bring that pH up a little bit with some lime.
Some of us like to go on 2-week vacations. Can you tell us how you deal with the bucket on that?
I've got my drip system is on
You
timer.
gonna go over that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't bring anything, but I do the drip system. I've got on my Blackberries, I've got a 1/2 inch drip line, the round 1/2 inch drip line, what they call a main line, and it just goes on top of my containers, and I punch a hole in it and put an emitter there. It's a 3-gallon emitter, 2-gallon emitter, and on each one of them. So if I turn it on, if I don't have this time of year, I don't have the timer set on yet because we're still getting some cold weather and I don't want the timer to freeze. But I'll put the timer on it and it'll come on. In the summertime, I had it coming on every day for maybe an hour or two. If it comes on an hour, I know I gave it 2 gallons. I do walk by at least once a week and look at the emitters, make sure they're all pumping. Now on my vegetables, I've got tubes, 1/4 inch tubes running down my vegetables, and I don't have as much. I can't see as well if the vegetables are getting as much water. Again, I'm on well, so I usually run it until they start overflowing. Earth box starts overflowing or whatever. But if I was buying water, I wouldn't do that. I would put it on a specific. In the spring, maybe 30 minutes a day. In the summer, maybe an hour a day. Because like a tomato plant, a blackberry plant too, but a tomato plant in the middle of the summer in a wicking tub, you're gonna put 2 or 3 gallons of water in that thing. That tomato plant is sucking some water in July. Trying to make that juicy tomato. Somebody else. All right. So the con of a container is they take more care, and you just have to think of it as like an infant. One reason if I was planting a blackberry in the soil, I'd give it maybe a little compost, maybe a dab of fertilizer, but I think they're right when they say don't fertilize. I don't think it's necessary if you're planting in the soil. But if you're planting in a sterile, peat, whatever environment, it's just like a little infant laying there. If it gets something to drink, you're going to give it something to drink. If it gets something to eat, you're going to give it something to eat. That blackberry plant or any plant in a container, vegetables too, whatever it's going to eat or whatever it's going to drink, you got to do that for it. So that's the only con is for me is you have to take more care of it. If it needs fertilizer, if a plant's in the ground, be it vegetable or fruit, if a plant's in the ground, there are nutrients in the ground. It's going to go down there and it's going to look for them, and it's going to get some of the things it needs from the soil, from the ground. In a wicking container, it can't do that. You've got to supply.
Kellogg's and Miracle Grow are doing raised bed mixes with a lot of compost in them.
Yeah.
Would you use that material in your wicking tub or not?
I haven't. When I fertilize, my initial fertilization, which we'll do in a minute, is 1 pound of fertilizer right around the ring of that wicking tub. Or in the case of the earth box, they give you the earth box chart shows how to fertilize, no matter what you're growing. It doesn't Earthbox doesn't give any directions for blackberries, because I might be the first one that ever tried blackberry in it, I don't know. But I do it basically like I would do a tomato if I put a tomato in, another heavy feeder. And it's gonna be, the fertilizer's gonna be on the very rim of it, this outside rim, the plant right here, and the fertilizer's gonna be on the outside rim. The guy that invented them, he passed away, but he's a huge tomato farmer in Florida. You know, Florida's known for their tomatoes. And he got wiped out one year by Harvey or one of the probably Hugo or something. One of the big hurricanes just wiped him out, completely decimated his tomato crop. And he said, there's got to be a better way. So he invented the Earthbox trial. It took him about 4 or 5 years to do it. And he has, or his family or whatever, his farm is now just acres of Earthboxes that they grow tomatoes in, ship them all over the world. But there's a certain way to plant. On the Earthbox website, they show you how to plant, how many things will go in an Earthbox as far as vegetables go. Again, they don't cover blackberries, but you can put, I had 6 or 8 okra plants in one last year. Okra plants were that big around. I mean, they look like trees coming out of that thing. I had okra everywhere. I did it just to see if we do it, and it was crazy. Big fan of Earthboxes. And they're a lot more attractive than that hillbilly blue. Hillbilly blue is pretty if you like hillbilly blue. So the pro on the soil is you get natural nutrients, you get rain. Now you got to get some rain too. When if you're in a container, you get some of the rain. But I'm talking about a good soaking rain will water your soil planted blackberries better than it will in a container. One of the cons of planting in soil again is gophers, runners. We talked about where they're never. I mean, very seldom. You may find one every now and then that comes up where you want it to, but most of the time it's going to be where you do not want it to come up. You're gonna have a larger walkways, and you're gonna have to have a larger area, and you can just line these up and they're not going anywhere. They're gonna stay in that straight road you put them in. So you might can tell I like containers. All right, any other questions?
At any point, do you have to worry about being root bound?
I don't know. Like I say, this is my going into my 3rd year, and I can dig down in there, and it's got a lot of roots, but it propagates itself from the roots too. I mean, that's where your new plant comes up. It's from the roots. So I haven't found it to be a problem. Now, if it becomes a problem, I'll definitely put a video out on it and say, okay, folks, we got a problem. Houston, we got a problem. Yes.
I think that I'm hearing you say that I'm not going to be able to plant these in my clay soil. I'm up on black one.
My soil is about like that. In fact, in the summertime, it's more like that. And that's where the worst soil I have is on the front south side of my property, and that's where I put my blackberry patch. Again, I mulched them heavy. Mulch will change your soil. If you can get wood chips or hay, straw, leaves are great, just leaves blow away. But mulch I've done a lot of videos on soil transformation. I have got the hardest, reddest clay, and now it's that deep. Where I plant my garden is that deep and just black, beautiful, composted soil. It is absolutely beautiful. And it's because I piled about 2 feet of wood chips on it and left it for about 2 or 3 years. And they mulched down and mulched down and mulched down, and it's just beautiful. And the same way with blackberries. I used to, when I had them in the soil, I would go down there, because I was just getting so many wood chips every day. You need low chips? Yeah, come on. Now, where am I going to put them? So like I said, 700 feet, and I would just pile up. They would probably, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say they were piled up. Now, I don't know if it was a good idea, but the first year or two, I would just piled up with a mulch. And then, of course, after about a year, that goes down about 6 inches. Next year, it's down pretty much on the ground. But it really brings in the earthworms. The mulch does. So if you're worried about the clay soil, I would mix in some potting mix when you plant them, and some compost, and I think you'd be okay. Because like I say, my soil's terrible. except where I've transformed, where I've changed it. Tomatoes.
Sorry, I got a question.
Yes.
The main purpose, I guess, of the wicking tub and why I want to do it is because I would think that you would have to water less with it because you have the water reservoir in the bottom. So you have a certain amount of time, depending on how big that reservoir is, that's going to wick back up into
Yeah.
the soil and create a still moist environment. So,
They say, I think Earthbox says, and Wicking Tub is really just a knockoff of an Earthbox. Earthbox started all with the wicking. It's got two places on the Earthbox that it wicks the soil, the water up through the soil. And Mr. Leon came up with this, and it's just basically a hillbilly blue Earthbox. That's what it is. But it's just it's a mode where you've got the reservoir on the bottom, just like an Earthbox does. Earthbox got about 2.5 to 3 inches of water in the bottom, plus the 2 wicks. And this has the same thing, about 3 inches. Depends on what size pipe you put in it. You're going to have, your hole in different places. Your reservoir will be different sizes. And then it's wicks from there. You always have to have, and I'll show you in a minute when we do this. You always have to have some of the soil, some of your mix, potting mix, go down to the bottom of the wicking tub because it's got to have a place to wick up. So that's where your water is. You just main thing is keep the water out of the black pipes, the corrugated
right.
pipes.
I've done your hybrid ones.
Yeah.
Those are really easy
I
to
really
do.
like
I
those.
made some for my parents as well. I really like that concept. But I guess my question really was geared at, do you still have to water those wicking tubs every day during the summer, the heat of it, when you have that water reservoir still? Or would it give you some time?
All I know is I'll go out there during the heat of the summer when it really got a good big tomato crop, or even just full of blackberries, a lot of new growth, a lot of the Primocanes coming up, and I'll water. Depends on whether I'm doing it with the irrigation or with my wand, but I put a lot of water in it every day. Now, if it's not real hot, if it's 90 degrees instead of 98 degrees, I'm watering 3 times a week maybe. But if it's 98 degrees, 100 degrees, and it's real hot, and you start to see the leaves kind of curl just a little bit, then I'm gonna
Amp it up a little bit.
yeah, amp it up. I usually just do it till the water comes out the hole.
Yeah.
And that lets you know. Now I haven't done it yet, but there's an idea to put a skewer in it, something like that, with a fish float on it, and put it down in there, and then have a mark on top of it. And when it'll tell you when the water goes down, you've got a mark down here. You got, you're empty. You got to go out. That way you can just walk by and look at that.
That's a great idea.
It's a good idea. I haven't done it yet, but there's a lot of great ideas I haven't done yet. That's just one of them. All right. So the cons of a container would be, or of the soil rather, would be gophers, runners, walkways, and you need a larger area. If you're going to do a bump, now if you're going to do commercial blackberries, like I say, you want to plant them as close as you can, and those workers are just going to have to fend for themselves. I tell you what, every time when you got thorn blackberries, the juiciest, prettiest blackberry is going to be behind about 4 layers, 4 cross limbs of thorns. It's going to get you every time. That's why I don't do thorn. All right, fertilization. I love water-soluble fertilizer. My initial planning on this or vegetables, either one, is going to be a pound. That's what Earthbox says. They put a pound of lime, pound of fertilizer in each Earthbox upon planting. And that covers the Earthbox for the entire season. Now, if you're going to plant a fall garden, you probably need to replant, refertilize. You probably need to dig that fertilizer up. If it's synthetic, probably dig it out. I've shown some videos on that because synthetic fertilizer can leave some salts and stuff like that organic's not going to leave. But I like the water soluble. I can come over here. I've got a little funnel that's it's an oil funnel. You just put an oil can on and it's just the perfect size. I just put it right down on there, and I get me a spoonful of the 2020, and then I take my watering wand, water it down there. That kind of stirs it up in the bottom, where it's just going to sit there as a clump. And I love the water soluble, but again, my initial fertilizing when I plant is usually a synthetic because I'm not organic. I don't claim to be. But this time of year, on established plants, since like we said a while ago, the roots are everywhere. I don't know whether you call it root bound or when you're reproducing from roots. I don't know whether root bound is a problem or not. I don't know. But you got to be a little bit more careful. So, like a couple of weeks ago, when I started seeing a lot of green growth, I sprinkled about a couple of tablespoons of the water soluble on top. It looks blue, it looks like Miracle Grow, but it's 20-20-20. I don't like Miracle Grow's NPK rating. But anyway, and then I just watered it in because it's water soluble and it just takes it down through. And another good reason to do it that way is if you've got wood chips, you've got some mulch on top of it, you have to rake all those back to put it into fertilizer. Now, a month or two from now, or a month or so from now, I'll probably come in there with maybe a couple of tablespoons of triple 13 or an organic or something like that, and I'll just come in there with a trowel, kind of move it out of the way, and then cover it back up. And I'll do that maybe 2 or 3 places around the rim, but I try to stay around that rim, not too close to the mother plant. Right? Yeah.
Have you got a video out or anything about the?
Yes.
What you need, your soil for the wicking tub?
Which one?
The soil for the wicking tub.
Yeah, it's got to be a potting mix. It's got to be 60, 70, 80% peat. So you can't just use garden soil. You can't just use compost. You know, compost may do for a while, but compost is not. The peat is what wicks. The peat is just sucks. It's like a sponge. It sucks that water up. So you really need a high peat concentrate or a high peat content in your wicking tubs. Let it so it'll wick. Now, if you're just planting somewhere else, if you're planting soil and you just want to put some in there to amend your soil, like she was talking about, then you can do whatever. But if you're going to do wicking tubs, it's got to have that high concentration of peat in it. Something else? All right. So I like the 20-20-20. First year, I plant. I apply when I plant. Subsequent years, I will. If it's 20-20-20, it's hard to burn stuff at 20-20-20. That's another reason I like it. You probably can, but it's difficult. I never have. And after harvest, you're supposed to fertilize again to get your new canes, your floor canes, get them going for next year. You want them to get as nice as they can be. You want to be able to prune them, and I'll show you about pruning in just a second. Again, blackberries need 4.5 to 7.5 pH, and that's a wide range, which tells you blackberries are pretty forgiving. They'll grow. I mean, whatever you got, unless you're in rocks and gravel, they're gonna grow, I think. I don't know. I didn't last year. I don't know that I will re-lime. I probably need to. Just maybe the lime I brought today is a pelleted lime, which is going to be a slow release. I probably should come in there and just put some lime on top this year, and just because it's slow release, and just let it kind of go in there and just release slowly. But everybody asks me how I fertilize during the year, and that's if I feel like it needs something, I'll give it just a few tablespoons of something. Now if it's organic, you can give it at least twice what you would of a synthetic. All right, irrigation. We talked about that. If you're in the soil, I would definitely encourage you to mulch, but put down your irrigation line before you mulch. Ask me how I know that. Because you're going to have to rake all of it back. In fact, I would say put down your irrigation line before you ever put your plants in the ground. It's just important. We're going to start getting warm. If you're going to plant now, they need to have a good irrigation system. Mulching, again, they love mulch. It does promote the grass invasion. Wood chips, leaves, straw, hay, landscape cloth. It's a great idea, but that new plant's got to have a place to come up. So unless you cut some slits in it or something, I don't see how you could use that. Earth boxes come with a cover, but you'd have to cut slits in that cover to get it to reproduce itself, to get it to send new canes up. So I don't think landscape cloth is a good idea. Never tried it. You may try it and be successful. I don't know.
What about between the rows?
Oh yeah, sure. In fact, that would discourage canes coming up where you don't want them. They're gonna come over there and they're gonna go up. Ooh, no, and then they're gonna come back over here. I did that. I was telling someone a while ago. Did that with carrots one time. I've never grown a good carrot in my life. And I put some in some raised bed garden with real loose soil, and that carrot went down. It started growing good, and then it hit that clay. And I pulled out the carrot, they're all L-shaped. Carrot, look it up. Carrots need leg room. That's the name of the video. Pollination. Most blackberries, as far as I know, all blackberries, but I may be wrong, blackberries are self-pollinating. So you don't need a different variety for pollination. Now, they do need to be pollinated, and bees are your best pollinators. So if you can plant some flowers or something that would bring in, attract your pollinators, that would be better. As I understand it, again, working on my doctorate, but as I understand it, every little bump on that blackberry has to be pollinated. Every little, when you eat a blackberry, the seed that's covered with the juicy goodness, that had to be pollinated. And you'll see some blackberries that maybe the tip of it or half of them didn't really make like they should have. And my understanding is because they didn't get pollinated, fully pollinated. So bees are good. Bees love blackberries. Okay, trying to hurry. I don't mean goodness. Summer pruning. Summer pruning is different with floor canes than it is with Primocanes, a little bit. In the summer, a Primocane, let's say this is a floor cane. When it comes up, this is what grew last year. Grew real good last year. You pruned it like you should, and this year it puts out all these berries, and then it's gonna die. It's gonna look just like that. After it produces berries, it's gonna start looking pretty poorly, and it's pretty obvious it's dead. That's what I tell everybody that asks the question, which do I know to prune out? It's pretty obvious. And it's not going to look that dead, but it's going to look pretty doggone dead. The leaves are going to start to die, the cane's going to start turning color, and if you know it produced blackberries, if you know it's one of your canes that produce, especially, but just wait till it's dead, prune it out. And that's usually in the summer. Again, my pruning was usually in July and August, and which is a wonderful time to get out and prune 700 feet of blackberries with thorns on it. But when a cane comes up, let's just say this cane comes up like this, and when I get to the top of my trellis, which is if I'm in the ground, I'm going to have a wire at about 18 inches, and another one at about 3 feet, maybe 4 feet. And when I get to the top of that wire, the trellis wire, or in this case, of course, you start measuring right here. I have a wire here and then a wire here. When it gets to the top of that wire, about maybe 4 or 5 inches above the top of the wire, just in case it wants to lay over something like that, I'm going to prune the top of it. And typically, it's a terminal end. You can just pinch the top of it off. What that does is encourage this. If you prune the top of it, that's what you can see. Look real close. Right there is the terminal end where I pruned it, and it encouraged all this growth right here. And that's where you make most of your blackberries, not here. Most of your blackberries are made on these laterals. So you want to encourage that lateral growth by pruning that top, the main cane. Prune it off at whatever you choose. I mean, I've seen some people let them grow 10 or 12 feet and just put them on a trellis, but then I think they're missing out on blackberries because the blackberries are mostly made on your laterals. I want to encourage those laterals, so I nip it off pretty quick. I want it to get a little above my trellis wire. And if you don't have a trellis, you just got some good, big canes that are going to stand up real good on you. I wouldn't go over 3 or 4 feet because, again, you get that thing loaded down. We get one of these windstorms through here, and it's got 5 pounds of blackberries on it. I've had them break off. I mean, just snap off at the ground because I let them go I got greedy and let them go too tall. All right. But that is, and when these laterals, I usually let the laterals, if it's a floor cane, I'll let the laterals get maybe 16, 18 inches long, then I'll prune them because it will make more laterals here. These little nodes here, all of them are going to come out with a lateral, and that's where you're going to make your berries. If it's a Primocane, and I just found this out last year, if it's a Primocane, I do this, let it form the lateral, and then I got so many berries last fall by not pruning them off like I normally would, because they seemed to make huge clusters on these terminal ends, the very end of the plant. It would just send out, I think, 10 or 15 huge blackberries on the end of that thing. So I did a video on that. I said, this is something I discovered, that on these Primocanes, I'm not going to cut them off where I normally would if it was a Floricane, because I would have lost all those berries had I pruned it off. So, and then after they make berries, then yeah, come in and prune it off, and you're going to encourage all the lateral growth. So it's a little bit different. I've got videos on that. I've got cards up here. If you're not familiar with my channel, I've got some cards, and I've got an entire playlist on blackberries. But probably got 30 videos on pruning and fertilizing, a little bit of everything, planting, a little bit. Yes.
Do you have, do you use tie tapes to your wire?
Yes. Love that time.
Yeah, can you tell us
Tape
about
time
that?
machine. That's the best thing I ever bought. That's the best $30 I ever spent. I mean, when that thing gets up to you got your wire here. When that thing gets up to the wire, you just run that thing around it, and oh my gosh, that's, I used to get out there with all the little ribbons and all this stuff, and that tape time machine. It takes a little getting used to. You got to kind of hold your mouth right sometimes, but that thing's worth its weight in gold. So I encourage you to get one of those for sure. Somebody else? Nope.
On the pruning, once do you have to, how long do you keep pruning? Because when you say the
Oh,
laterals come out,
You're pruning every year.
just for like a few weeks, or you just,
Well,
you're
I just, they grow at different stages. You may have one come up this week, and then a month later you have another one coming up over here. Well, it's not going to catch up with this one. So you'll prune this one where you want it, and then wait on this one to come up, and then you'll prune it where you want it. So they don't all grow at the same
it
rate.
doesn't hurt to keep pruning then if you.
No, as long as you know why you're pruning it. So
I started growing last year. They were landmark freedoms, I think. I'm not quite sure after it grew, but when I would prune it, it would lateral out and then just keep going. I
yeah,
was
the
afraid to
laterals.
keep cutting it.
I've seen laterals 6-8 feet long. Yeah, that's why you. Again, I would. You weigh out letting it grow, and see if you can get some blackberries on that terminal end. But I think it's better maybe if you see it's not going to terminal out and start putting out blackberries, you go ahead and nip it and get you some lateral growth off that lateral. Yes.
Could you talk one more time about spring and fall harvest on the Freedom?
Again,
An early harvest.
you get the early
then
harvest from
later.
last year's canes, just like you would on any other blackberry. But then you also get pretty quick. I mean, it starts like in June. I'll be getting berries off my new canes when the other canes are starting to die out.
Off
the
your
last year's
Primocanes.
canes, off my Primocane.
Yeah.
And then when summer hits, 90, 95 degrees, it pretty much stops. And then, I mean, you just get a few. You can tell it's hot. They love hot weather, but they don't like the fruit in hot weather. And then when it starts cooling off a little bit, they'll kick back on, start making blooms and going.
So would you say that the Primocanes are the ones that are yielding in the fall?
Yes.
And
Oh, yeah.
Floricanes are yielding in the spring, sort of, or
Yeah,
to mid-
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, that's why they call it a Primocane, because it yields the first year. The prime year, the first year.
When you have both of them, then
When you have both,
you just get
well, I mean, but I said that. I said it yields the first year. It yields both years. It yields some in the first year, and it will get some the next year. Just when your Primocane fruits in the fall, don't cut it off. It's going to fruit in spring too.
That's right.
Wait till it's dead. When it's dead, take it out.
That
But,
tells you it's gone.
yeah, you'll know it's gone. Pretty obvious. I think they want me to move on. All right, we covered pruning. I think we're down to the demonstrations, which we may do outside. Again, propagation is you can propagate from cuttings. Take that off, put it down in some soil. Summertime is not a good time to do that, but I've propagated quite a bit last fall. Tip burial. If you've got one that comes up here in the middle of the row, if you're planting in the soil, dig it up, I put it in a pot because it's typically gonna be hot, it's gonna be summertime by the time that happens. And then put it in a pot until fall and then put it in the row. But you can also take one of these canes and bend it down and let it touch the dirt, put a rock on it or a fencing or a landscape staple or something like that, and it will root right there on the dirt. Throw some dirt on top of it and let it start rooting there, and it will do that in your row, and that's how you're going to fill your rows in. So, all right. The winter cane removal, again, if it's dead, take it out. If it's not, I mean, obviously dead, visibly dead, leave it there. Winterizing, we talked about, do you cover anything? I didn't. Like I say, maybe I should have, but I don't know how I would have covered these 5-foot blackberry plants in a 50-foot row. I guess I could have tried, but I didn't. But that was just a freak year. And any other time, they don't, they've just never been bothered by 10 or 15 degrees. They were bothered by -5.
What about, okay, when you talk about propagating, where do you take the plant from the plant?
What do you mean? Where do you take the cuttings?
Yes, when you take the cuttings.
Just, you can either take, I could cut that one right here, 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 and get 3 cuttings out of it. You want a node, at least 1 node below the potting mix, if not 2.
Okay.
Let me say a quick word about propagating. It is illegal to propagate for sale because these plants are patented.
Gotcha.
But to propagate, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on YouTube. But as I understand it, you can propagate for your own use,
Okay.
and maybe even to give away. But I read the patent thing, and that's as I understand it.
Okay.
All right, we got demos now. I don't know whether we're gonna do them outside or whether we're gonna do them inside. But
Things that
yeah.
The drawing first?
Yes, drawing.
Okay.
We kind of need to know, one of the reasons we want to do a drawing now is we need to know when we plant one of these, they really should be watered in. But if you're in a car and you want to put that in your back seat, you really don't want it watered in. So we're going to draw names now, and if you're in a truck and don't mind, having some water sloshing around, then we'll water yours in if you win the drawing. So how are we going to do this?
Yes.
All right, let's do the earth box first. All right.
Can we turn it on?
Yeah.
How?
How? As many pictures as you take of sunsets and sunrises.
It won't let us in. You have to put your thumb on.
It's the magic thumb.
Great. So let me I'll show this to everybody real quick. This wicking tub has a grate on the bottom. There's a cavity and that holds the water in the bottom. This is the tube that you'll water it through. And as Alan said, you've got to have a spot on the bottom with dirt that's going to be touching the water to help it wick up. These are your 2 wicks right here.
And the guy that built these says the way to do it without dumping your stuff into these holes is just like trying to get 4 people to a doorway. Just do it as quick as you can. Less likely it's going to go through the hole. Yeah, that's a bigger bag. I'd get the 3. Since you've got these 2 wicking wells over here, that you get soil down in that. So put your soil in there, beat it down in there with your fist. At this point, I'll go ahead and use your fertilizers. Yeah. I forgot they said you got the whole kit.
I bought the whole kit. The whole kit and caboodle.
Filled up about halfway. And then you'll pour in your lime, dolomite, not hydrated lime, don't use hydrated lime.
Did you say that was 1 pound?
1 pound, yes. 1 pound of lime, mix it in. At this point, you can wet it down. Go ahead and start hydrating because it's going to shrink. It's going to, as you wet it, it's going to pack down some. We can do that now. You said you want it, okay, or no water?
Does it leak out the bottom of that? Then yeah, let's not.
Yeah, it's got a, it's got an overflow. Yes.
Okay.
If you tilt it just wrong, yeah, it'll leak. So, all right, so we did that with the rest of it in here. We're going on this one. We're going to do it.
It's hard to get a hold of it, yeah.
We're going to dump a lot more than we thought we were going to. That's the way to do it. Wait. On this, we're going to leave room for putting mulch on top because I think blackberries just love mulch. On a regular earth box, if you're planting vegetables, you want to mound it up even after you wet it down. You want to mound it up because you're going to put this bonnet on there, and that bonnet is shed water because when you fertilize it, if you get rain through it, it'll wash some of that fertilizer out. The relief all on the bottom. So you want it to be a contained thing, but we're not going to put a bonnet on for blackberries because you want the shoots coming up. So we'll leave a couple of inches. Back it down. Wife's getting a good shot of my butt.
Good.
There you go.
It's
Turn
been
around.
50 years. He's probably used to that by now.
And which one do you want to put in here?
We can do the.
You can do all the same ones across there?
We're going to do all the freedoms across here.
Okay.
How many did you want to plan for across here? There's 6 of the 7 of the Primocane freedoms.
I would, when I planted the Wachitas, I put one on each side, but I don't think it's necessary. Now we need to put the fertilizer strip right there. Fertilizer strip goes on the same side as the watering tube. This is how you water it, down the watering tube. And if you want to add some other things, if you're planting tomatoes, you may want to put some Epsom salt in it, with that magnesium sulfate or something. What? It's up to you.
You think 2 will be better, or should we just do 1?
They're going to spread out so quick. I think one's plenty.
Okay.
And cover the fertilizer strip up, and we'll plant here, right in the middle of it.
Okay.
Not the right place. Like I say, this will plant the same depth as it is in the pot. You can take that off later. That's about all there is to it. Just blackberries are pretty unforgiving. They just don't. I mean, they're pretty unforgiving. I wouldn't wait too much longer. Yeah. I wouldn't wait too much longer. And there again, I would make sure you got a good irrigation plan, either system in place or a plan in place in your head. But that one, when you get home, just water it real good from the top to start your peat getting wet. Once it gets wet, then it's harder for it to wick. Doesn't make sense, but it's harder for it to wick when it's dry than it is when it's wet. So you don't want to ever let your earth box get dry, and or wicking tub either.
Anytime the soil gets dry on a wicking tub like this, or even in the ground, the water has that surface tension, and it's hard to break that tension. If the ground is slightly wet, has a little bit of moisture to it, it's going to soak in a lot easier and faster. But if it's bone dry, you've probably seen it a million times, it just rolls right off.
Yep. And peat's real bad about that.
Yeah, peat is bad about that.
Okay, there's the earth box. Now, we're going to do a construction, talk about construction of the wicking tub. Some of you already made them. Basically, it's a fill tube inch and a quarter. That's what I like. And it's this corrugated French drain pipe. This is perforated, got a little bitty slits in it. You don't have to. I like it best. I think it's probably better to have. Somebody mentioned the hybrid tub that I thought of. I did a video on building this tub, but doing it a little bit differently. In that they sell this material that's already got the sock on it, and I would just take and just gather that and put a tie wrap on the end. And I did on that one. I did three. Normally I would do 3 pieces, one long one in the middle and 2 short ones on the side. But now I saw Mr. Leon do this the other day, and I like the idea better. But I would go with a socked tube, and then it's like 10. You can find them in 10-foot lengths. 10 foot should do 2 wicking tubs, I think. Because this is about 4, maybe not quite 4 feet. And all the tubs are a little bit different. So if you got different colors and stuff like that, it's going to be different. Because he was cutting his 4 feet 4 inches, and I cut this one 4 feet 4 inches, and I couldn't get it up to that. So the hole, however tall your pipe is, this is 4-inch pipe. You want your weep hole 1 inch below that. So this is a 3-inch weep hole. Weep hole is 3 inches from the bottom, and you want these 2 ends to come together because you want your fill tube on the opposite side of your weep hole. So this goes in there like this. It just leaves a ring like that, and then this. And all I did was just come in here with some landscape cloth and just tie wrap it on the end. But again, it'd be easier if you had the socked material. Just pull some of that sock out, and you may run out of sock, but pull that sock out, put a tie wrap on it, and the other end make it a whole lot easier. And put that down in the middle. There's your 2 wicks right there. So you want to be able to, when you put this mix in there, you want to make sure you get down in there, because that's where your water's going to wick back up. Because your water typically is going to stay 1 inch below this right here. Same in the earth box. Your water is about 1 inch below that grate, that black grate that's up there. And that allows your plants to what's called air prune. Roots won't grow in air. So the roots come down to that pipe up there, go down to that grate in the earth box, and they hit that and they stop. And then what they do, they tell the plant, I can't grow any more roots. So it starts growing those lateral roots. And so you get a huge root ball, bigger root ball when you air prune like that. Happens also in grow bags too. That fabric grow bag, it'll hit the outside of those bags and it'll stop and air prune. And that's where you get a lot more denser root ball. So right here we've got the 2 wells. Now we're going to dump in, and let's put the pipe in. You want the pipe, you don't want to put the pipe in there like that, because it may or may not work. Put it with a beveled end, so it's not going to stop up the pipe. And it's on the opposite side of the hole. Yep. Opposite side of the hole. Alright, motor. Alright, at this point, I put a lime in. This is just a pelleted lime. About the first 4, 5, 6 inches. Now something I didn't do. Get down in there. Right there. I need to get down there and push dirt down in those wells. I forgot to do that. We got carried away with the dump.
Well, and doing it live is different than doing it on video. You get outtakes on video.
Lots and lots of outtakes. So mix it in, pack it down. I'm not going to go a lot deeper than that, simply because I really would like to see you put wood chips, a couple of inches of wood chips on top. But what I do when I fertilize vegetables, blackberries, just about anything I plant, I go around the rim. Now this is synthetic. This is triple 13. But I've never burnt one. doing it this way. And I just put it around the rim, and I'll do that second year too. I mean, if I've got an established plant, I won't do a pound maybe, but I'll do a few tablespoons, and I'll just come in here and if I've got wood chips on it, I'll just rake them back. You'll feel the roots. It's got a lot of roots. But rake it back, put a tablespoon in it, and I may do 3 places. Put a tablespoon in 3 places around. And put a little bit more dirt on it. Do it without dumping out the load. Yeah, I think so. Alright, we'll plant one in it. Now these are Ponca?
This is Ponca, yeah.
The Ponca is a floor cane. I thought they were Primocanes, but I did not get any berries last year. They are floor cane. And when you rake your dirt back, don't rake a bunch of fertilizer back with it either. That's good dirt. He said we can water this in, so we can.
Great.
Anybody else want to get your hands dirty? Anybody want to help plant those?
One thing I'll recommend real quick while we're doing this hose has been sitting out here, this water is getting pretty hot in here. Always let the water out and let it run first before you're going to water any of your plants.
That'll scald.
It'll scald the roots, it'll scald the plant.
Especially if you have a black hose.
Woo! Yeah. So we'll give this a minute to run here. Who won this one? I did. Oh, all right.
Going in too. No, it's just going down. But that's why you put that bevel on it, so it doesn't just sit flat on it. It has a suction there. Yeah. I mean, I water, like I say, my drip system is on top, and I water from the top sometimes. But it doesn't matter. You can water from the top. If you want to fertilize, you can do some fertilizer on top and then water it in from the top. And I just water from the hole, make sure I'm not just running fertilizer out.
Sorry, we got 200 feet of hose here.
Exactly.
Hey, that's cute. Nobody wants to get your hands dirty? Come on, get it. There you go. So, how many? 5, 7. Somebody had to do the math. I went to John Tyler. 7 plants in a.
We don't have to do all 7.
Oh, okay.
Whatever you think the best spacing is. Okay.
Well, let's just put one on the ends, maybe a foot in.
Yep.
And then go 4 feet.
Okay.
I got a tape measure somewhere. You gonna do 3 feet or 4 feet?
Whatever you think is best.
Well, it'll fill
do
in for
4.
you quicker at 3, but
Let's do 4.
okay.
Give them a little bit of room to stretch out.
All right. 4 center to center. Somebody guessed perfect on that one. Should come out just right.
Just about right, yeah.
Maybe want to move them all, shift them all this way, maybe
Just
6
about here.
inches.
Yep.
Then you should be right.
I think that'll work.
All right. You are the master planner.
That's dangerous.
If you only knew.
Just take it out of the pot and we'll just dig a hole, same size as that basically. Now he laid down, this is all compost y'all laid down, correct? I think that's what he said. Just deep enough to get the, now I say, yeah, fall down. It's gonna,
Don't, because I will too.
it's gonna, I'm afraid that some of the bottom of it's gonna crumble anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to.
Yeah.
That's getting close. Over there.
Oh, and see, I got a good spot. I got a pole to pull up on.
All right, anybody else want to get after it? We can get them all planted pretty quick.
Now, this is all potting. All compost here. God love them. I have great employees, and I said just get a little bit of compost and put it down here, and they really put it down. So typically, I would recommend that you mix this in with some of the existing native soil. Absolutely, yes.
You want to do that one?
Sure. Right where it's sitting. You want it?
Yeah, anybody else want to do that one? If not, I'll do it.
Come back and get my berries.
Right?
Well, I guess another point I'd like to make is the whole idea behind having the demonstration garden here is you'll have vegetables back there. There'll be different vine fruits and berries in here. There'll be other trellising items back here like tomatoes and whatever else my wife wants to grow. And then the demonstration orchard is over here so that in 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, everybody always wants to know, well, what's it going to look like in 2 years? Well, now we'll be able to show you.
All right. Now, if you're interested in a trellis, this is just about the easiest trellis you could ever build. And if I can find the end of this thing. Let's wrap this. I'll tell you what. This is your main walkway. Let's put the ends on the less traveled. Okay. They may be sticking out from wires through there. And the first. You're going to have some canes that when they first come up, they're going to want to get a little askew. Now I'm going to, since this is raised here, I'm not going to measure there, I'm going to measure from there. So that's subtracting about 6 inches from that mound there. So I'm going to go up about 18 inches right here and do the first wire. I'm going to leave some because that's where I'm going to tie it off. And the other one comes around, we'll tie it off here. It's going to be a mess.
That's all right.
And go inside. No, go outside. Let's see where I put this one. 2 feet, which is 18 inches above that. So. Around it real good. Put that away. Do the same thing. Yeah, since I had COVID, I can't keep my pants up. I didn't have that problem pre-COVID. I guess I had plenty of butt then or something. I've just never had this problem before. Well, sometime I do, but we'll tie wrap it. That's what I always do. Yeah, you can, but I always tie wrap and find it to be just fine. If you pull too tight, especially if you've already got one wire up, like we're going to put the second wire up. If we pull that second wire real tight, it's going to pull these posts in, and that's what's going to happen. Yep. It's going to slack. So you can't pull it real tight, but you don't need to, especially if you put your posts this far apart.
So once the lines start to point,
Yeah.
Is that a certain gauge or certain?
This is electric fence wire, 17 17 gauge, galvanized, that way it's not going to rust. Electric fence wire is what I've used. I put trellises on my patch when I had them. You may want to come back and bend these down so nobody snags them.
That'd be fine. Yeah, we can take them off.
Let's just start the next one at about 18 inches, 16 inches above that.
Okay.
Well, now wait a minute. That's going to be how high? That's only 3 feet. Let's go ahead and come up here.
Okay.
Because that'll be. You got yours driven in a little further.
Yeah.
So that's 55 inches minus 6 would be 50. And 4 feet's about right. So 48. Yeah, that's fine. Let me get a little bit more.
Yep.
Tie that off.
Sure. Oh yeah, you're gonna need some more for the tailgate.
Second notch down.
Second notch down.
They're all made in bed. And I'm sure glad he in these fence posts. That is another job that's just not a lot of fun. I would suggest you put these ends on a less traveled part of your property, because these ends will stick you. You don't want kids to walk by and get to poke their eye out or something. So make sure you always curl the wire back on itself and twist it real good, so it's not dangerous to somebody. I'll leave it like that for right now. So when these come up and hit this first wire, if it's leaning this way, I'll go ahead and take that tape machine and tie it to that first wire. And then, because it's already leaning this way anyway, so it won't be long, it'll be on this wire. And then when it gets about right here, I'm gonna cut it off. Now if it's right in the middle, and if it's right here, if I've got a few inches above and it falls over, it may miss the wire. So I may go a few inches above that. If it's right next to the wire, I may just take it off right there. We'll put a couple of middle posts. And we'll come in here on these. Now these black tie wraps are the best as far as what am I trying to say? Sunlight resistant, yeah.
UV resistant.
UV, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So you're educated. I'm not.
You do the one down there?
Yep. Folks, that's a trellis. And it probably costs, I don't know. T-posts used to be $1.98. I think they're $7 now, but the wire's cheap. That wire's probably $10, $15 for a quarter mile. And T-posts, you just can't find a better trellis. If you put your post close enough. Now, you would have to have your middle post. You don't want to just put two on the end, because they're gonna drape out here, because they're gonna get heavy when you get some berries on them. You need to go ahead and expect those berries. So, what else were we gonna do? Anything?
I think that's it. That's great.
All right, let's do it.
They had a trellis for the
trellis just like this, and I've got my wicking tub sitting in the middle of it, just like that. This year I spaced them 20 inches apart, but this trellis works great for in the soil, works great for containers, and just can't beat it. Originally I did my first trellis when I had about 700 feet of blackberries. I just had one post on the end, a couple of posts in the row, and I just wrapped. I had 2 wires, one running on each side of the post, and I tried to, there's 2 wires here, and I try to get the wire in between it and get the other wire. This is great. This is the best way to do it. I mean, and I don't think you're going to have. If you have blackberry plants that load it down and break it, I want to come to your house and look at it and find out what you did. All right, I think that's it. I sure appreciate you folks coming out.
Thank you, everybody.